and welcome to episode number 247 of the Comic Watchers Show. He's Chad, I'm Matt, and we are here to hang out today, this week, this time, with the one and only Jeremy Adams.
Hello!
Yay!
Happy 247th. That's awesome. That's a lot, guys.
Yeah, thank you. We
really kicked it up last year with about 44 shows.
Wow.
Yeah, it was most of the year last year.
That's awesome.
So anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about Flash Gordon over at Mad Cave. So Jeremy, how the heck are you feeling, dude?
I'm good. I'm feeling good.
You've got some big stuff happening right now.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, a couple of years ago, I mean, as we were talking, Chad was saying, it's like I was mostly ensconced in animation writing, and I was doing a little live action writing, but for the past, I don't know, since I moved to Los Angeles 24 years ago, I've been trying to figure out how to get into comic books, but there's no actual like manual to what to do, And I had a couple close calls. So the last couple of years, I've been steadily working in comic books. And 8-year-old Jeremy is like, "This is it. This is it. You did it." And everybody that knows me growing up is like, "Yeah, of course that's what you would be doing." I'm like, "Well, I'm glad you all had faith." So yeah.
So tell us a little bit about 5-year-old Jeremy. How did he? Is that when you got into comic books, and what was the book that you kind of first looked at? Or
so my dad had drawn a couple DC comics, and my parents were divorced when I was around 5. So psychologically, obviously, I'm looking for my dad's attention or approval. But like he had done some Ghosts and some Captain Atom in the 80s and a couple Alpha Flight issues. So probably around 12 or 13 issues in all. But as a kid, it was like, oh my gosh, my dad drew comic books. That's, so sure. I was absolutely, I love comic books. I had comic books since an early age. My older brother swindled me out of my half of the X-Men comics that we owned together. The parents do that thing where like, you can share them. And at some point my brother was like, I want them all. And now I'm going to screw my brother out of it by giving him all the Spider-Ham comics. And that's somehow a fair deal. But he's that much older than me that he was able to like nuke me, My first comic I remember reading was Batman. It was a detective comics with Killer Croc as an assassin. I think it might have been the first or second appearance of Jason Todd, but he had like orange hair. It was terrifying.
Oh yeah. Jason Todd Mark 1. Yeah,
and I was a big Batman kid growing up, but I also liked a lot of weird books. Like we didn't have a comic book store, so you would get what you would get, right? And there would be books that would show up at used bookstores or antique shops or whatever. So one of the first books I ever got was a Ditko Blue Beetle. So I'm a big fan of Ted Kord Blue Beetle. The era of Armor Wars and Captain America No More, the Mark Gruenwald stuff, Quasar. But also weirdly, I was definitely a quantity over quality guy. So at some point I remember like you could buy one Spider-Man or you could get 4 New Universe titles. And I was like, I'll take the 4 New Universe titles, So like I have all the New Universe books, love them in their own weird fashion, I have a very eclectic taste.
So what is it that kind of, drew you to Flash Gordon, and what is your history with the character?
So when I was talking to Mike Martz and I was pitching some creator owns and he kind of listed all, he's like, well, yeah, maybe, AKA, no, none of those stupid ideas. I've got some licensed material. Would you want to think about? And he started listing them off and he said Flash Gordon. And of course, anytime you say Flash Gordon in your head, you are followed by right? Like that's everybody.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember seeing that as a kid. And I remember being like, oh man, this is cool. This is weird. This is interesting. As I got older, I got really involved. I grew a big love of pulp sci-fi. I worked at a movie theater in the college I went to, University of Arizona. And there was these 2 older guys that were essentially Waldorf and Statler. And everything we would say like, oh, we like this new movie. And they're like, that's a stupid movie. That's a ripoff of blah, 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 And at that point, they got me hooked on the John Carter and Mars series, the Edgar Rice Burroughs John Carter and Mars, which I flipped, and I was like, yeah, okay, old people. And then I went and read. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is the greatest thing. And then through the years, my first internship out of college was with Dino De Laurentiis, who was the producer of Flash Gordon. And so when I was an intern there, I remember just thinking, I'm going to rewatch everything Dino did, like just kind of get acclimated. And, I grew up with Buck Rogers, and Flash Gordon just kind of fit snugly in that era of square-jawed hero that went and saved the universe. And then I did a thing with Bruce Timm, and he was big into pulp novels, and we would talk about pulp sci-fi, and the thing that got me, like the Alex Raymond stuff and everything, there was a quality of unrestrained imagination back then. And like, yeah, maybe the science doesn't work out, but like, it's like a wave of the hand. It's like, we don't really need to know the science of it. That took a backseat to the fun, serial adventure quality of it. So, between that and Buck Rogers and John Carter, it was all in a kind of a malaise. And when they told me, not a malaise, that's the wrong word, but like in kind of this weird blender of like pulp sci-fi. So when they said, hey, would you want to do something? Like, sure. And I started thinking of what I definitely was like, I'm not going to do a reboot. I'm not going to do a reboot of Flash Gordon. I felt like I'm just going to continue the story. And I started going like, oh, it's just going to be Adventures of Flash Gordon. It's going to be very like paint by numbers. And then there was a moment where they said, somebody said, you can't use the word Mongo. And I was like, what? And I remember being so like incensed by it, because they were like, it's like a bad word. I'm like, I don't think it's a bad word. I think you're making that up. It's not as bad as you think it is, And maybe it was wires crossed. Maybe I got that wrong. But whatever the case, I went, fine, I'm going to blow it up. And then it was like, it was kind of like you say one of those things thinking they're immediately going to be like, of course you can't do that. And they're like, yeah, okay. And I was like, all right then, So issue 0 became this really huge thing, right? I mean, it became a catalyst for a different way of exploring and being introduced to the characters within the Flash Gordon universe and Flash Gordon in general. And because of some of the sensitivities, Will Conrad has been doing such an amazing job. He's like, okay, I can't make him look like Max von Sydow, like Ming, but he does such a good job making him alien but still recognizable. And it's just been a kind of weird. I don't know how to describe it, except that like if I'm working on a DC book or something, I have to keep a lot of continuity balls in the air. Mm-hmm. I have to like keep abreast of what's going on around the universe and stuff. And this, it's like I get to do whatever I want, So there's a little bit of relief and a little bit of like, I'm just gonna have fun, And it's very much kind of a serial, just like it originally was intended. It's like, oh, cliffhanger, and oh no, what's gonna happen now? And I bet you Ming's gonna do something horrible, like it's like those people. But I've been having a lot of fun just kind of playing with that in the sandbox.
So how do you keep it fresh while still adhering to kind of a retro serial feel?
Man, I don't know. I don't know if it's fresh. Every time I send a script out, I'm like, well, I hope I don't get fired today. Like, like I if you're like me, I grew up, none of this stuff was, no one loved this stuff. It was like, I got beat up for this stuff. It is a weird turn of events that all the things I was bullied for, I'm getting paid for now. Like, it's so perplexing to me. And so as far as if it's fresh, I have no idea. I just write the voice that I have and just hope that they say yes to it. Every time, by the way, every single time. It doesn't matter what I've done. If I've done a movie, if I'm writing a movie, like on the second act, I'm looking up different jobs to get, like my wife's like, what's wrong? I'm like, I can't do this. I don't know. I could probably work at Panda Express. I like the food. And she's like, oh, are you in your second act? I'm like, yeah, I'm in the second act, like 100%. And so even with comic books, I'm like, maybe, and I send it off. And thank goodness I have collaborators like Will Conrad that, draw so well that I think one of the things I really love about comics is that I get multiple bites of the apple, if that makes sense. I'll write a script. They'll come back with art. I can adjust the script. Even inking or lettering, I can adjust it again. And for me, it's really great because over and over I realize, man, I don't need so many words. You know what I mean? Like it's like, that art's pretty good. I think you kind of got it, So it's like chop. And even for me in reading, I'm like that too. If I open a book and it's a Wikipedia page entry, I get really antsy. I'm like, I don't know if I should continue on here,
So in issue 1 of Flash Gordon, when we open up, Flash is in a very particular situation.
Yeah. It's been out long enough. We can talk about it, right?
Yeah. But so using, he was captive, using that as a starting point, where has this, the story gone in the five issues that are out?
Yeah. I mean, so much of it was like, I remember even pitching it. It was like, oh, the first couple is going to be Escape from Planet Death. That just sounded appropriately, pulpy in my mind, and so where it's gone is, of course, like any hero. First of all, who doesn't love anybody trying to escape a prison? You know what I mean? Like, you give me a movie where it's like blah 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 has to escape from prison. I'm like, yeah, let's go. I'm in. 100%. But in his escape, he realizes that another layer of Planet Death, there's somebody that has taken over that particular cell block, which happens to be Ming the Merciless. And Ming is, of course, because of how evil he is, he's figured out how to use Flash in a way to secure his escape. So then Flash knows he's going to be betrayed. Like, that's the thing that kills me. Is like Flash keeps knowing, like, yeah, he's going to betray me. But Ming is the scorpion on the frog, right? And there's a certain level of tension between them both where they both need each other, but they both know that at any given opportunity, Ming's going to just try to destroy him. And so there's kind of an uneasy alliance as they attempt to break out. And even then, because they're far from what used to be Mongo, there's an element of them not sure the state of the universe and not sure what's going on out there. And there's obviously a lot of dangling threads with like the Empress and Zarkov and different pieces of the Flash Gordon universe. And the other thing I'm trying to do is, and I'm doing that, I feel like I do this a lot with a lot of characters, is I kind of want to know a little more of the internal thought life of the character. So I do have quite a few kind of flashbacks of different characters so that we get a more kind of holistic view of who they are. I did a flashback of Ming, and I kept looking, doing exhaustive internet searches on like, do we have the origin of Ming anywhere? And like, I couldn't find anything. And I was like, as a writer of genre, if there isn't you're like, this is the greatest day of my life. Like, you get to kind of like fill in that hole a little bit with your version or whatever. And so that was really fun. It's really fun to be able to add to the toy box, is what I refer to it as, I really enjoy doing that because I can't imagine where I'd be without people that wrote comics and movies and television. They just let their imagination fly and they just create all these characters and scenes and stuff. And then, I'm out in the playground playing them. And so if there's any way that I get to like contribute to this generational hero in any way, I feel like, I'm the luckiest guy in the world.
Well, in the spirit of, or in that spirit, in your mind, who is Flash Gordon as a character? Like, what's his internal life like? Where does he come from?
Right.
How do we? I mean, do we care really? Does he just need a lantern jaw?
Right. Yeah. So that's been kind of an interesting thing that we're exploring. Like his father is a scientist, but also like I have them have this kind of it's not upper class. It's probably upper class because they own horses and they kind of have a ranch, but he's also well learned, and there's a little of this kind of, the only way to describe it is I think of my grandfather a great deal, and he was from the greatest generation, the World War II generation. He was this broad shoulder, square jawed guy that had this very strong moral compass, but he wasn't kind of like redneck. It was very kind of this upper, almost feels like upper class cowboy a little bit.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of place Flash Gordon in that category, but not so unrelatable that I would hate him as an 80s, like, you know what I mean? Like, I remember we got invited to a beach club, and my wife's like, we're going to go to this beach club. I'm like, no, we're not. And she's like, what do you mean? And I go, that makes us an 80s villain, like immediately, and she's like, no, it's not like that. And I'm like, I don't know. I bet I'm
Isn't it?
Yeah, I'm like, they're going to be blonde. They're going to be wearing like sweaters. They're going to try to stand in my eye. It wasn't like
Ew, Muffy.
Yeah, but with him, with Flash, I feel like he has a very, I think his dad has been really informative in who he is, and I like showing some of that background of this kind of like, hey, he's really good at athletic things, but his dad really values the mind more so than probably athleticism. And I think there is an element of Flash Gordon that is very much like, if I have the means and capacity to help, then I need to help. Like that's my lot in life. If I have the ability to help, then I'm going to help. And so, he gets embroiled in, aliens attacking. And what are you going to do? He's the Patrick Swayze in Red Dawn. It's like, let's go. Let's go do this thing.
So, you also write this other guy who travels around in space.
Right. Yeah. We can talk
is it easy? Yeah. Well, Green Lantern. Is it easy to separate the two, and how are they different, and who would win in a battle?
That's really good. I do think that they are different because I think Hal Jordan. I think Hal Jordan's wisdom meter is a little low. I think that Hal leaps into action, not really thinking.
Knuckleheaded.
Yeah. Hal's just like, watch this. He's a little cockier than Flash Gordon, in my mind. Flash Gordon has a little bit of strategy. I think Hal has it. I just think that most of the time Hal's like, I'm going to do something so awesome. There's a little arrogance about Hal, even though it's been tempered by, dying and becoming the Spectre and coming back, but it's only a little. So, we still see that Hal is just like, again, Hal operates from sheer willpower. Like, Hal thinks, I'm going to make this work no matter what, even if it's a bad. I think Flash is more like, all right, I'm going to do this, but I'm going to try to do it smartly. I'm going to try to make it so that I don't die. Hal's like, well, we'll see. And especially now, I think Hal is even worse now because Hal's already died. So if you've died and you've even become the spirit of vengeance, there's a certain element of like, well, I've already done that. So I feel like there's a little more cockiness there now.
So how long of a run do you have plotted out currently for Mr. Flash Gordon?
Flash Gordon? In my head, I have about 15 issues.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I know that Man Cave has no signs of stopping with Flash Gordon, even if I don't continue on with Flash Gordon. If you've been watching, they've got comic strips and quarterlies and it is the Flash Gordon universe going on over there, which is cool. Because it's a weird thing. You think about this character that I think came out in the 30s, and here we are, 90 years, almost 100 years later, and he exists in some capacity. I think what was interesting when I started writing was how few people, even my generation at least knew about the movie.
Right.
But we're still, the newer generation has no frame of reference for Flash Gordon. And I'm glad to see that something like that, because I think there's so many cool things. Obviously, there's so many things that have been ripped off, right?
Right.
The Hawkmen or even Ming to a degree. There's certain things that have just spilled over into other, different ideas. Like when I read John Carter of Mars, I was like, oh, like that's where Star Wars got that or this, there's all these pieces but that's the fun thing, right? That's the fun thing of any type of fictional, like if you've ever had the chance, you go read the story about how Spielberg and Lucas did Indiana Jones. And it's just a direct result of, hey, you're not allowed to do James Bond. And George Lucas going like, yeah, we're going to do something else anyways. It's Indiana Jones. And you're just like, on paper, that sounds ridiculous. And also, it's so good. You know what I mean? So I steal everything you can. Steal everything you can. No, just kidding. But you know what I mean? It's like you'll remember something in your head from a movie and you'll go, or my favorite thing, you'll watch a really bad movie and you go, what would I do to make that better? And so there are themes or moments that you go, ooh, I wonder if I can do a better version of that. And that's what like all genre is. It's kind of this weird trickle down where we're all taking what's before us and changing it and molding it into something new, which is a cool place to be.
Yeah, most definitely. And as long as your voice is what's paramount in the story,
Right.
You're putting your stamp on it. It's becomes its own thing.
Right.
By that virtue.
Yeah. And because it's such a visual medium, cool. He's so incumbent upon, sadly, I just have to scribble words, but the artist has to do such a big piece of this. And Will Conrad, not only just a gracious, wonderful human being, he just seems to be having fun taking the ideas and making them, they feel very lived in is the best way to put it. It feels like a very lived in universe. And I appreciate that.
Yeah. How did Will come to be involved in this project?
So, what's funny is Will and I must have got the same pitch at the same time, but Will had done this 2 issues of The Flash, really heartfelt issues that I had written in very early on when I was writing The Flash. And I had got a list, somebody on the higher ups had given me like, hey, let's do this artist. And I said, no, I was like, oh gosh, no, that art is really experimental and weird. Just not for me. Right. And I said, well, here are some ideas. And I had put Will on that list and like 2 others. And I remember getting a response like, well, there's superhero artists. And I said, Flash Gordon is a superhero. I don't know what to tell. I'm afraid to break the news to you, but Flash Gordon is a superhero. And I guess on Will's end, they came to him and said, hey, we've got a couple things. Would you be interested in doing Flash Gordon? It's going to be written by Jeremy. He said yes to Flash Gordon because he was very excited. And then they said it was being written by me. And he was like, oh my gosh, double yes, because we were very friendly from the other Flash days. I do realize I only need a Flash Thompson to get my full
the hat trick.
The Flash triple header.
Yeah, it's like the EGOT of Flashes. I just need that Flash Thompson, and I'm good to go.
Okay, Marvel, balls in your court. New Anti-Venom series starting.
Exactly. Yeah. But it has to be called, yeah, exactly. I guess I would do anything that had Flash Thompson in it, but if it was called Flash Thompson I would be even better.
Yes.
So, what do you hope to bring to the Flash Gordon mythos as you're, moving through your story?
My goal is just to bring a lot of humanity so that people really enjoy the character. There's something about older characters in the golden silver age. They were such ciphers. There wasn't a lot of like personality that you could attribute to them. You knew that they were strong-willed and tough and whatever, but you didn't know the human side of it. So that's one thing, is I hope I can deepen that character in a way that you're like, man, I really like this person. Like I understand why he's saving people, and I want to hang out with him on his adventures. The other thing is just kind of an awareness of the real breadth of Flash Gordon's universe. There was some really cool world building in the old series and the subsequent novels and the subsequent comic strips, and there's so many neat ideas and quirky ideas and peculiarities to that world of now destroyed Mongo that I think are best explored and not left dead.
Right.
My hope is that Flash Gordon in the next, how many years, I hope they have a movie. I hope that people, find some. I'm never sick of the idea of that human guy that gets thrust into a situation beyond his comprehension. I was a huge Farscape nerd too, right? So like I watch Farscape, and that's kind of a kid cousin to Buck Rogers and Flash Gordon and all that stuff. And when it's done right, it's done so right, which Farscape for me was just bone crushingly emotional. If you get past the first season, which I really like too, but that show is great. I'm sitting here plugging Farscape. So kids, if you haven't seen Farscape.
So, moving on to, kind of more of your, what is it like? What's the difference between writing for Mad Cave and, writing for DC? I know you mentioned there's kind of more of a less of a structure that you have to follow, less continuity. Is there anything else, with how you approach the writing?
Yeah, I mean, with this in particular, I kind of know where I'm going a little bit more than I do with the DC stuff. DC stuff will get interrupted occasionally by like, it's time for a crisis, everyone. And you're like, oh, geez.
Crisis.
Yeah.
It's Thursday.
Yeah, exactly. The other difference is that I intimately know the DC characters. Like I grew up with them. And I know them backwards and forwards, just like Marvel characters. It's like I read so much that I just know who those people are in my mind. The Flash Gordon is a little more malleable, like I get a little more leeway to just kind of do what I feel like would be cool. And at the same time, I'm very conscious of, it's not, I know there are Flash Gordon fans that are like probably hardcore, whatever, but they're not as many, and they're not like the vocal people that, I hear from all the time when Aquaman #1 comes out. It's like, well, blah, 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 blah. It's like, I don't get that level of scrutiny. So there's a much bigger amount of freedom. And weirdly, because there's more freedom, I'm much more careful, I feel like, to make sure I capture the spirit of this kind of bygone age of hero,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really fun. It's really freeing. Versus, like I said, with DC or Marvel, like I've been on conversations where I'm the nerd that's just like, well, we can't do that because 6 years ago in this issue, blah, blah, blah. And they're just like, Jeremy, who cares? And I'm like, I care. Like when I took over Green Lantern, they were like, just write a paragraph that everything went back to normal. I'm like, I can't do that. I'm too much of a nerd. We're going to spend 19 issues explaining why everything's back to normal. They're just like, oh gosh, it's like, I'm my own worst enemy half the time.
Well, at least you care about continuity.
I do. Yeah. I do too. Like I'm such, and it's hard too because DC continuity oftentimes is like an Etch-a-Sketch, right? So you're just trying to figure out, okay, well, was this past the reboot? Yeah, exactly. The cool thing when I was writing The Flash, though, in my head, originally, when I started at DC, they said everything that happened. And I was like, that doesn't make sense, but I'm just going to go with it. And then I wrote The Flash as if, there was this great flash forward mini where Wally got on Metron's chair and helped like knit the reality.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, Flash knows and I started saying that with all the speedsters because the Speed Force, we are on a tangent, but because the Speed Force has like infiltrated every piece of the universe, time and space, I was like, he's fully aware of every continuity shift. And he's fully cognizant of it. And it's enough to drive you mad. And because his family was erased from existence and he brought them back, they're basically the only thing keeping him from losing his mind. And I love the idea that Wally, in particular, he knows all the different variations. And this is the variation he chooses to live in.
Right.
But yeah, so I don't know where that came from. But anyways.
Damn it, we got Wally back.
Yeah.
That's all I really cared about.
Yeah.
So, when we're talking about Flash Gordon as a character, as an individual, how he relates to Ming, what else are you looking for in terms of his supporting cast?
I think as the different members of the supporting cast reveal themselves, we obviously have done a bit of a time jump. So we'll see where they are within this new universe that has been created post Unraveler. And there are going to be some significant twists that will really shock not just the audience, I think, but also Flash. But I think that's all part of the larger story. I'm a little bit ahead, so I'm always trying to think like, where are we right now? So we're already getting hints of Zarkov, which is going to be a, significant reveal. Yeah, that's all I can say, because otherwise I'm going to spill everything.
Well, you shouldn't do that. Mike Moore probably wouldn't approve.
I know. I have, there's this guy named Gary Mariano who's a publicist, and in animation, I swear, I was like, we were trained, like, if we got near the edge, I swear there would be like a red dot that appears, and I'm like, Gary's like, kill me if I say too much.
It was his panel. It was his panel when we were doing the Super Sons at New York Comic Con. So that was,
Yep.
You had your time with everybody, and you had to move on.
Yep. And it was over. It was over. I was just like, I remember saying to somebody, it's like, oh, Gary's not looking. And they're like, no, Gary said no. And they were like so scared. I'm like, okay. But that's how I am with Gary.
So what's the difference between? Because I know you worked on adapting different stories for the animated format. What's the difference between writing a comic book script and adapting it for an animated feature?
I've been really lucky because I've never had to actually adapt a book or anything for animation. In terms like Super Sons has moments that's very similar, but not there's no story about Starro doing the blah 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 blah. I remember. So I've been very lucky. But the difference between comic book writing and animation writing, to the bigger point, is I actually think they're fairly similar compared to when I was writing on Supernatural. Like, that was much more like you had the blessing of having like a live action actor that could, with subtlety and movement, do things with your dialogue or whatever, and you could get away with having more dialogue. With animation, you do not have, I don't think, the luxury of a lot of dialogue. Nobody wants to sit around and watch Scooby-Doo monologue for 3 days. You know what I mean? And something needs to
be entertaining in the right
that
way.
would be to be or not to be. Yeah. but even with I find that both that and comic writing are similar, because what I'm doing is trying to write a blueprint for the artists that are going to come after me. So in animation, I'm writing it for the storyboard guys, and hopefully I write enough that they know what's going on and gives them inspiration enough that they can plus it, they can make it funnier, they can make it more exciting or whatever. And sometimes I'll come in afterwards and do a little bit more rewriting in animation, but very rarely. And then with comic books, I have because there's an artist involved, I can speak directly to that artist in a way and be like, well, what do you want to see? What makes you excited to draw? Because I feel like part of my job is to get them excited about what they're drawing. And it's a very give and take. And I'm very much the guy that grew up, and if I opened a book and it was ugly looking, and people told me it was a great book, I'd be like, I'm sure it is, and immediately close the book. Like, like I'm that shallow. I'm like, I really like to just see the art. If it's good and it works with the art, then that's the perfect collaboration. But both of them are really expressively and descriptively writing things for the artist to take hold of and go with, and then trying to stay out of their way if you can, because sometimes I'll get pages back, like I said earlier, and I'll be like, man, this is such a beautiful page, I'm ruining it with my words. Can we excise those, or can I move those around, or can I say it simpler? Which, by the way, the answer is always yes. So because I would much rather see a awesome splash page that didn't say anything, instead of a splash page that has me waxing poetic about, something stupid, that I could say on the next page. Because that's what I want as a consumer. That's what I want as a kid. Jeff Johns used to tell me, he's like, you never put a splash page that you can't, you wouldn't be able to tear off and stick to your wall like a poster. And I thought that was pretty cool. I don't adhere to it, but I think it's pretty cool.
So are you doing any work in animation right now?
I am. I just finished running a couple seasons of a Lego show, which has been really fun. I do a lot of work for Lego and have done a lot of work for Lego. I also have an animated movie that I believe is coming out this year, maybe, in the superhero genre. I can't say anything more than that. But I always have one leg in the animation universe, trying to cut my path.
Right on.
I know that you also wrote the one shot where you had Hal and Ollie, kind of the hard traveling heroes, team up. Um, how was that writing that story and trying to capture that feel of that '70s vibe, and
That was really
adding
fun.
to adding the backstory to the Teen Titans?
Yeah. So, I mean, what was funny was they just asked me, well, you want to do World's Finest with Ollie? I was, yeah, I'm the Mikey likes it of comics, as I say. Like, you asked me to write something, yeah, I'll do that. And there were no real restrictions. Like, I gave him a couple pitches, and for whatever one, the like Deathstroke one stuck. And then there's that moment where you go, uh-oh, why did I do that? Because it's in a weird quasi continuity. And it wasn't until I wrote my first draft that I went, hey, I could make this fit in to his first appearance. Is that okay? And they were like, shoot, yeah, man. Like, I think it was a surprise to them, as it was, I was like, hey, this would kind of like dovetail into it. That would be cool, because otherwise it would, it was just a one shot. It was just kind of a comical, fun one shot, and you got a lot of character of Ollie and Hal and their antagonistic relationship and kind of the fun of it, and it wasn't as super political, I think, as the Hard Traveling Heroes was at the time, but I don't think my editors didn't seem like it wasn't necessarily in the 70s. Like there's that weird like compressed DC timeline, you know.
Sure.
So at least I got enough conversation about anti-authoritarian Ollie versus Hal, and then it was on to the thing. But then realizing, oh wait, I can slip this in. I can make this like a unofficial prequel to Deathstroke's appearance in Teen Titans, which is fun for me. Anytime I get to add little snippets like that. But the majority of it is like I love writing other characters. I think that's the first time I've been able to write. No, that's not true. I did write Oliver Queen in the beginning of the Wally West saga, and I wrote some of the most heartbreaking stuff because he realized Roy was going to die, and I remember writing that. It was kind of like when I was retconning Heroes in Crisis, and I remember just going like, "Oh gosh, this is brutal." But I remember writing Oliver Queen, and I do have an affection for Oliver Queen and the Green Arrow, and I remember reading Longbow Hunters as a kid. Kevin Smith's run was really good. I really loved that run. So anyways, yeah, it was such a great time, and working with Lucas Meyer and Travis Mercer, who are the artists on the respective pieces of that. And Lucas Meyer is this just young, hungry artist that is just so, like, when you meet somebody that's so excited about what he's doing, it's great. And Travis is the same way. He's just the ultimate collaborator. So it's great. And I like writing Barry too. If they offered me a Barry book tomorrow, I'd be 100% on it, because I'd done so much Wally, and Wally's really fun. But I like the idea of, CSI Barry, a little more logical, maybe a little more nerdy, not as jokey,
So okay, right now, you've written The Flash, you're currently writing Green Lantern, you just started Aquaman.
Yeah.
Who's another DC character that you'd love to get your mitts on at some point?
Oh my gosh. I mean, the dream, guys, is always Batman. The dream is always Batman.
Sure.
All roads lead to Batman. Anybody in the Bat universe, I think, would be cool. I was a big, do you remember when it was like there was the Batman books, but there was Nightwing and Robin, they would like kind of, there's that really wonderful kind of familial relation between Tim and Dick that I just adored. I'm a huge Cassie Kane, Cassandra Kane fan, because I love the DC martial arts stuff a lot. So anything in that, I would, obviously I'd love to do Superman. I would love to do Wonder Woman, but Tom King's going to write that till the end of his days. So I'm never going to get that. So if I was looking out and I was saying, what would you let me do? Now, selfishly, because I've created a couple characters I really like, I would love to do some Gold Beetle silly book, and I would love to do an Omega Bam Man mini. I would kill to do how Omega Bam joined the ranks of the wrestlers across the multiverse. Would be a lot of fun. I keep pitching them weird ideas, and it's just so. I don't know what's more fun, me pitching the ideas or their faces when I pitch them. It's just like oh, Jeremy, what? And I'm just like, it'd be awesome.
And I know you mentioned, Aquaman is your latest book.
Yeah.
Kind of what was your, what's your take on Aquaman? I'm glad to see he's back to looking a little less like Jason Momoa. And
yeah, I mean, if it was up to me, he wouldn't even have the beard that he has. So, my take, I think Aquaman to me is a very strange character that we all know, I think more so now because of Jason Momoa, because of Batman Brave and the Bold was outrageous, because of Jeff Johns. I don't think there's that level of oh, he's a joke. I think that's I think Jeff Johns did such a good job of hitting that head on. I think what's hard with Aquaman is it's kind of a weird ethnocentric thing where we're he's in the water, who cares? There's a level of oh, well, it's underwater. It has nothing to do with me. So there's not an immediacy to it. And for me, it's very similar to Flash Gordon. You start to realize how little you know about this guy named Arthur Curry, and you know very little about how he was raised on the surface. And I kept thinking, like, I wonder if he misses hamburgers. Like that's kind of like I was just like, because I miss hamburgers, like if I was in the water all the time, like I'd be like, that's got to get old. Like you got to miss TV or something. Like there's got to be pieces of that. And so I just kept thinking about like, wow, I wonder how much we remember from the boy, not the boy in the water, but the boy that was raised on land, the boy that was raised by the lighthouse keeper, and how that works in his personality. And right away I talk about like it isn't, at the same time, it's not about him being a king or a superhero or whatever. It's about him being something else, because he more than other heroes has had this entire monarchy thrust on his shoulders, and a people that he had to kind of take care of, and a huge amount of burden that maybe he didn't want, or he did want. I mean, it's up in the air. But then you take all of it away. You take it away. You take away the things he loves the most, the things that he knows the most. And what would he do to get it back? And I think the journey that he's on now, my hope is that at the end of it, people are like, man, I'm scared of Aquaman. Like, like that dude, don't get him mad. Like that kind of thing. Like I want there to be a level of, I think we know it with certain things. Like Superman's always going to be good. Superman's going to be like, he's going to try his best. He's never going to kill anything. He's going to save the day. Batman also, in terms, is like, he'll save the day, but you'll have a lot of broken bones, but he still has a sense of justice. Wonder Woman is more in the vein of kind of where I think Aquaman lives a little bit, where it's like, they are going to do the right thing, but also, war is hell. But also, if my responsibility is a bunch of people, then, or if you're in the way of me and my children and my love, get ready, because this thing called Aquaman's going to come, and you aren't ready for it, no matter who you are. And so I have much more of a kind of a Conan the Barbarian vibe with Aquaman right now. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
Well, the first issue was outstanding. I just want to say, yes, wonderful debut. What was it like working with John Timms?
Oh, it's so great. And what was cool about it was I didn't know him, but we met at New York Comic Con this year. And oh my gosh, he's such a sweetheart. He's such a sweet guy, And again, immediately when you meet somebody and they're really nice, you're immediately like, well, what do you want to do, man? I'll do anything you want to do, And he's just got this sweet, incredible job. The way he does it, and he does it so fast, and it's so fun to see what artists are particularly good at, and to watch him take 7 panels and make them feel big and airy is wild to me. And you should never let an artist know that you can do that, because then guess what? It's like, it's the 9-panel show. No, I'm always grateful. He's doing such a great job, and we move into some pretty hardcore imagery, and he just knows what he's doing. And man, there's nothing better when you vibe with an artist, and then you start going, well, I wonder if he could do this. Like Zervatico and Green Lantern. We were on Earth for so long, and the minute I wrote a scene in space and he drew it and he sent it back, I was like, I'm the biggest idiot on the planet. Like I was like, we should have been in space day one, because this is stupid how good it is. And I was just banging my head against the wall. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm such a moron, So finding out what they're really good at and like then exploiting that to your advantage is awesome.
So, looking back at your, career as a comic book writer and working in film,
Yeah.
what's the biggest lesson that you learned, or what advice would you have now that you would give, your younger self just starting out?
I think the best advice would be like, there's several, but one is keep going, because it took me over 10 years before I got my first credit on television on Green Lantern, the animated series, and that can be really discouraging, if you're trying to make a living in the arts. And even after 10 years, it was like, this year I got no money. The other thing is that you have to be willing to be collaborative, and you just have to sublimate your ego sometimes. That's hard. And there are some times where you stick to your guns and you stiffen up your spine and you go, no, I'm not going to do this. But a lot of times you have to realize that these are not toys that are yours, and you have to be willing to collaborate, because at the end of the day, no matter how good you are, if you're terrible to work with, no one will want to work with you. But if you're great to work with, even if you're mediocre like me, people will want to work with you. You could get things, if you get things in on time and you're great to work with, it's a huge percentage of the battle, because the people above you, the bosses above you, I swear to you, I think this is why I stayed on The Flash as long as I did, was because they were changing. Warner Brothers was being bought out, and there would be different people in charge and different editors. And I think they just kept going like, well, he's turning it in on time and it's doing okay. That's a problem I don't have to deal with, and I really do try to do that. And I'm not going to lie, as I get a little older in it, I probably stick up for myself a little more than I did before. But I don't know if you can do that right away. Like, I know some people that like, damn the torpedoes, you'll do it my way or the highway. And people are like, have fun on the highway, because it's like, you have nothing to back yourself. You have no pedigree, you have no credits, and you're like, damn the man. And I'm like, yeah, that's cool, except that you will never get into a place where you can actually do that. So be collaborative, be nice, be on time, and that will work wonders.
And do you have any, creator own stuff that you've been working on, or
Yeah, I do. I mean, it's a new level of fear I didn't know I had. So you remember how I said every time I turn in a script, I'm terrified? Yeah, this is worse than that, because at least, it's like I turn in an Aquaman script. At least I go, well, I know people like Aquaman, versus, and also I one of my biggest fears, the real honest truth is, the stuff I like is just so stupid. And I'm just so fearful, because everybody, I see a lot of my peers and they have really cool, highbrow, intelligent stuff. And I'm like, my stuff is so dumb. And I love it. It's just the stuff I love. It's the fact that I grew up watching canon films, and I'd much rather watch American Ninja than I would want to watch, Oppenheimer. That's just me. Sorry, So it's weird like that. But you have to kind of embrace your own love. But the idea of doing a create your own, and I have some in the works, but again, it's expensive to do yourself, and
sure.
And it's very terrifying, very, very terrifying.
Cool.
Go ahead, Chad.
No, I was just saying that was cool. So
it's
cool.
It's all
cool.
honesty.
Terrifying fear for yourself and your future and your stability.
Yeah. You have kids. Like, well, they need braces, or do they? No, just kidding.
Lisa needs braces. But I mean, you make a valid point, though. I mean, it's something that you're like, oh, well, this is stupid. I mean, on paper, could have an amazing life to it. I mean,
yeah.
There's a comic from Jason Aaron and Mahmoud Asrar fixing to come out called Bug Wars, and on paper, that sounds dumb. Bug Wars, what the hell?
Yeah.
In the hands of master creators like these, it's getting all kinds of great advanced praise, and I bet it's going to be an awesome comic. So
of course it is.
Sell yourself short.
Well, that's a good point. That's a good point.
And are there any creators or artists that you would like to work with in the future?
Yeah, I mean, always. Like, I want my boss, Jim Lee, to do something for me. You know, I would. There's all the people I grew up with, right? You know, they've never. I mean, they've got their own stuff going. Like, if Rob Liefeld said, "Hey, would you write the story that I'm writing?" I'd be like, "Yeah, whatever you need," because I want that story. You know, I want the story of having worked with that person. Like when I worked with Bruce Timm, it's like, dude, I worked with Bruce Timm. You know, yeah, and it's like Kevin McGuire, like that was a huge bucket list. After Kevin McGuire did like a backup in The Flash, I was like, well, you can fire me now. I've already won. You know, that was kind of it. But there's a lot of artists that I'm meeting every day when I go to conventions and stuff. But I would be desperate to work with so many of them. Like, you know, obviously it's, you know, the Jorge, you know, like all the big ones that you're just like, oh, dude, I love that art. I would love to do something for J. Scott Campbell for some reason. Because I remember when Danger Girl came out and I was like, yeah, this is awesome. And also Tawdry, but awesome. You know, like, you know, you know, Jim Lee was obviously the big one growing up, which was huge. But I'm trying to think of other ones. I mean, there's so many. And every time I get to work with, and there's so many new up and coming ones too, you know, and that's been really fun. V. Ken Marion, who did the Fractured Spectrum special that just came out, I said it to him today. He was like, oh, I'm so glad that, you know, I got to draw this. I was like, bro, next year you're going to be unobtainable. Like, absolutely. Like, well, it was fun while it lasted.
Right.
You know, because there are some of those guys that you can just, I mean, think about Dan Mora, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's just suddenly, it's like the Dan Mora show. It's boom, and Dan Mora. And it's like, Dan Mora. Yeah, I want Dan Mora. You want Dan Mora? Everybody wants Dan Mora. You know what I mean? So yeah, I'm all in on a lot of those guys. I think they're all just so dang awesome.
Yeah, Zermanico comes to mind in that regard. I first discovered him on Tinian the Fourth's Justice League Dark.
Wow.
A few years back, and I mean, my mind was just blown by this dude.
Yeah.
And now you're getting now not only are you getting to work with him, but you're getting to work with him on my favorite character.
Oh yeah.
And I just sit here and wonder, it's like, why isn't Zermanico like the number one in demand artist?
I tell people all the time, I'm really, really like scared they're going to take him from me. And I tell him, I'm like, the amount of tears I'm going to cry is just going to be massive. When he did Flashpoint Beyond with us, I was just like, oh my gosh, he's so good. I mean, and Mitch Gerrits is a good friend, but he's tied up forever. He'll never, you know, there'll never be.
Yeah, Tom King will always have something for him.
Always. And
I'm
just like, whatever.
Damn you, Tom King.
Until Tom King is destroyed. No, just kidding. But there's too many of those guys, man. There's too many. You know, Jimenez is one of those too. That's like, shoot. And Yannick Paquette, I can't say his last name.
I think it's Paquette.
Yeah, and I met him. I just became friendly with him at a comic convention, and I was like, oh, this guy. Then I just want to work with him because I really like him. You know, I mean, they're super talented. Don't get me wrong, but when you meet somebody that are really sweet and like really fun to hang out with, that's also a huge thing too. Steve McNiven, obviously, people like that. I don't know what kind of crack I'm smoking here. Oh my gosh, I'm blanking right now. Oh well, I'm sure I'll remember in about 5 seconds, and then I'll be like blah blah blah. You know.
Well, you'll just have to come back on, you know, later and tell us.
Pat Gleason. Yeah. No, Pat Gleason is one of my dear friends. Pat Gleason. For some reason, my brain really shut down, and I just talked to him. Pat Gleason, I would kill. But Pat Gleason is part writer, and that's a problem. So we need to excise that out, and then just force him to do my bidding.
I know we're running short on time, but what is it like? I mean, you mentioned, you know, your Jeff Johns, you know, saying about the splash page and all that, how is it kind of standing on his shoulders and taking over Green Lantern to the next level?
Dude, it's not even that. I told him, I said, I went up to him and I said, hey, it looks like I have a Jeff Johns punch card because I went from Flash to Green Lantern to Aquaman. And I'm like, next year, I got to start my own business that's called like Phantom, Mechanism or something, Jeff has done more for DC Comics than I don't know who's done more, in terms of the mythology for DC Comics. He's done more to kind of like elevate Green Lantern, especially, obviously, but Flash and Green Lantern, Flashpoint, all the different things that he's done over the time. Right, dog? I have a dog over here. He's done more. It is wonderful, and it's hard because people are always going to draw weird comparisons. And honestly, though, there hadn't been a Hal book for a few years before I got on.
Yeah, it was weird.
And but it's always funny to me that it's just like, oh, it's a retread of this, that, and the other. I go, yeah, but it's been like 10 years, man. Like, it's about time to revisit the emotional spectrum. Like, can't just let it sit forever.
No.
And I like where you're going with the sorrow aspect.
Thank you. Yeah, the fractured spectrum and just kind of those pieces of, what was. Because I think sometimes what you got to do is deconstruct what is in order to reconstruct it, and I was just noticing, I was like, man, no one's using this stuff. So this will be fun to play in.
Oh, yeah. Well, it sounds to me like you're having all the fun in the world right now.
Very much so.
And my hat's off to you, sir.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Well, Jeremy Adams, thank you so much for hanging out with us this week for this last hour and change and talking comics. Folks, you should go check out Flash Gordon right now because it's awesome. It's from Mad Cave. We love Mad Cave around here. Will Conrad's the artist. He's an amazing talent. Yep. And you know what? If you don't know anything about Flash Gordon, damn it, now's the time for you to find out.
Yes, agreed.
So, having said that, Chad, who are we talking to next week?
To be determined.
To be determined.
I love that guy. Wow, what a talent.
All right. Well, until next week, we are the Comic Watchers, and this is our show. Thank you, Chad. Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you, Matt. Hey, that's me. Folks, it's an increasingly tough world out there, but it doesn't have to be. Get out there, do something good for somebody, support local comic shops, support local art. Just get out there and don't be a dick. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you next time.